Hello, welcome back to another What's on Your Mind. My name is Nimade Belu, or That African Butterfly, as I'm known on social media, and I'm your host. This is our weekly series where we talk to people about different things that's happening on our mind and around us, and we talk to people with lived experiences or some specialists. And I'm so excited today. I have someone to talk to me about both areas, who is Melissa Reich. She is a therapist. We connected over Instagram because I am a Bravo-holic. I love Bravo. I have my own separate Bravo podcast, and she does as well. And even better, though, she is a mental health therapist. So she talks about Bravo, but through the lens of mental health, which is a combining of my two worlds that I love. So thank you so much for joining me today, Melissa.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I adore you. I adore your content. And like I said, I'm just super grateful to be here and just talk, Bravo and therapy. Let's do
Thank
it.
you. Yes, I love it. And you have a little bit of an interesting story. So before we jump into the questions, could you tell everybody a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So I am a two-time cancer survivor. When I was 17 years old, I was diagnosed with what I was told was a terminal ovarian cancer. And so my parents, they took me to kind of get different treatments, and there were some doctors that recommended hospice, and it was a really challenging experience. And my parents took me to Penn Medicine. They saved my life. I was able to make a wish through the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and I got to meet the cast of Friends. I was an extra in one of the episodes, which we could probably talk for a whole episode about that. And so after that, I decided to, that is what helped me realize that I did want to help other people through sharing my experience, strength, and hope. And so I went to Penn State University. I got my bachelor's in psychology. Then I went to LaSalle University in Philly, where I lived for a long time, and I miss it every day. I got my master's degree in clinical psychology, and I have a license in the state which I live. So I'm an LPC. And then during my career as a therapist, I've been in the field for 22 years, and I've been in a lot of different milieus, inpatient, outpatient, drug and alcohol, mental health. So I've had a lot of lived experience. And in my 30s, I was diagnosed with a second cancer, which is now a cancer that I'm living with. Unfortunately, there's no cure, but medical technology is amazing. And I'm grateful again I went back to Penn Medicine. And so the last thing I'll say is I had to step away from my practice during the pandemic, because that's when I started to go through my cancer treatment for my second cancer. It was devastating for me to leave my practice, and I just thought, what am I to do? Where do I go with this? I love therapy. I think it's pure magic. I'm really passionate about it. And so it's a long story of how it happened, but I was able to make the acquaintance of the beautiful, talented Amy Phillips, and she helped me do this. And now this is what I'm doing. And here I am. So
Yes, and I love it. And we're glad that you're here. You've lived so much, and that's the thing, is you never know what people go through and what they've lived through just by looking at them. And it's one of those things, like, I've always known, but like, especially over the years during interviews and things like that, it's just like everyone truly has a story,
Absolutely. A story that we know nothing about and we can't tell by looking at folks. Because for me, you look at me, and here's the thing, we joked before, I don't doll myself up. I'm not wearing makeup. This is kind of the best it gets for me nowadays, but I look great. I look healthy. I look fit. So sometimes it's hard for them to understand how sick I am and how hard it is. So it is always a good reminder when we go through stuff that you just can't know by looking at someone, So
yeah, absolutely. And sometimes the invisible diseases are the hardest, because people look at you and think you're fine, and you're like, no, it's a mess under here.
Exactly. It's funny, like, if there's on days that I have to like use a walking aid or my cane or something, I get different treatment than I get when I'm just me, myself, and I. So I appreciate, invisible illnesses really do not get the attention that they should, and that it can be very invalidating too. But the good thing for me is, what I try to do is share my experience so that people just don't feel alone, because people are always going to misunderstand, they're, especially on social media, people are determined to
Yes.
misunderstand, to misread, right, to project and all these things. So, once you know better, you can do better. That's it.
Yes. And if that's one thing that social media teaches you, it's the power of projection and how everybody truly just projects onto you. And so
Mm-hmm.
you have to, when you're on the other side of it, like take it truly with a grain of salt. Because everyone is looking
Yeah.
at you, I was telling a friend the other day, people like to put you in boxes of how
Mm-hmm.
you relate to their world. And once you don't meet that for them, then you're the problem. And it's very hard for them to think of like, it's not you, it's them, or,
That's exactly right. And part of the magic of therapy is that people project onto the therapist, and it's a lot of good content and material for therapy to help. But the problem is on social media, I'm having all these people project their stuff onto me, but like thousands and thousands of people at a time.
Yeah,
And it is just more than one human being can handle. People expect me to be perfect, to be a robot, to not have any personality, to never misspeak. And it's like, we can't forget that mental health professionals are humans.
right.
And, so yes, it's important to be mindful about what you're projecting on the person that you're engaging with.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And that's part of why I wanted to have this conversation about mental health and reality TV. As we mentioned, we're both Bravo-holics. We love our Bravo. I mentioned I have a podcast too. It's called Bold, Black, and Addicted to Bravo because I like talking about show stuff in real life forms too. I feel like there's a lot of recaps and a lot of like, oh, here's what happened. But I like being like, okay, let's talk about, parenting issues, but using examples of people from the show that it's universal. We all know who we're talking about, or relationship issues, things like that. And then sometimes serious stuff like colorism. I think that there is something to be learned from reality TV if you just take a step back and look at it through that lens. So I love that you do that on the mental health aspect.
Thank you. It's been really successful. People really resonate with it because I'm one of those pages that I don't care about followers or clicks or this or that. I really do want to talk about the hard concepts.
Mhm.
And that is one of the things I pride myself on, and it seems to people really resonate with it, right? Because
Yeah.
it's just, it's a part of the human condition. So, yeah, it's great to be able to do that.
Now, when we talk about reality TV, because I need to talk to you as a therapist, because let me
Yes.
tell you, it is so toxic. Like it is so upsetting to me. And it's actually, I took a pause from my podcast because the community gets so toxic sometimes that you just don't want to deal with it. I replaced that obsession with K-drama obsession. They're still positive over there. So me and the K-drama girlies are like standing out, and it's nice, but I do miss the reality section. But it feels like sometimes people get in such a, what they call nowadays stan, which are like stalker
Yes.
fans about these reality TV people. And it's like, whereas in like K-drama world, we know it's a TV show, we know it's all fake. In reality world, it feels like almost because it's real people are unable to still acknowledge that it's editing and that you don't really know these people, like little glimpse of it. Like, what do you think it is about reality TV that makes people so like dig in so hard and also just able to like bring some reality into their reality TV?
Yeah, and that's such a good point. By the way, I listened to your podcast and I loved them, and I understand why you had to make the change because it does get there's so much vitriol and it can get so toxic, especially if you have an opinion that, God forbid, other people don't share.
Yeah.
It's but to me, this conversation needs to start with talking about parasocial relationships because for me, Bravo celebrities, there is something in particular about Bravo where it feels accessible, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fans can go to BravoCon and we DM with some of our favorite folks that we
Yeah.
watch on screen, right? I
Yep.
mean, I don't know if you've, DM'd with particular
Yeah, a
people.
couple of them. And it's like, oh, because it's weird because it's like, they're human. So it's not they're normal. So it's not a big deal. But it is kind of a big deal because I was just watching you on TV and now we're DMing, or now you're following me. And it's like, oh,
That's exactly right. So that feeling is what draws people in. Ultimately, a parasocial relationship, for those who aren't familiar, is just kind of a relationship that, for example, you and I, we have folks that have parasocial relationships with us that we don't know. We haven't talked to them. We haven't DM'd with them, but they listen to they take in our media and things like that. And they feel like they know us, but we wouldn't know them on the street. And so when you engage with someone who you have a parasocial relationship, there's this validation and excitement that you kind of just wonderfully displayed, where it's like, oh, wow, I'm DMing. I'll use an example. I DM with Dr. Tiffany Moon, and every time I do, I'm like, whose life is this? What?
Right.
What? How am I talking to the queen? So it touches a part of us that it makes us feel. So one, with parasocial relationships, the thing that hooks people in is there's a sense of community. And boy, you know as well as I do that Bravo has a huge community.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yeah.
Very far reaching. And so it's part of the community that I think people get excited about. But then what happens is, I feel the negative side of it is that there's this kind of, like, I'll call it mob mentality, where, and for me, I studied psychology, but I also minored in sociology, because I think the study of groups is just as important as the study of individuals. I mean, for me to do what I'm doing. And, research shows that social media literally changes people's brains.
Oh, I believe that.
And especially so I was reading something that you might find interesting, that if you have over 10,000 followers on Instagram, that is enough to change your brain. So imagine if, you're talking to all these people and you're communicating with Bravo celebrities, and that, it really does things to our brains. And then we like what it does to us, because we feel special and important, and we feel seen, and we feel part of a community. So it's a lot of things, but that's kind of my thoughts on that.
No, and it's true. And you have to, like, fight it almost. I found, for someone who's on both sides of it, like the fangirl, and then even though it makes you feel really uncomfortable, but like someone who has fans on the other side, it's like when people do that, like that, I think you said it's parasocial.
Yes.
Like, I've been at events and people are like, oh my gosh, it's you. And I'm like, yeah, it's just me. Like, I don't know, like, it's not a big deal. And then, so, like, sometimes I have to remind myself, like, to them, it is. And especially since my followers have grown recently, so I'm up to 15. Okay. And before that, it was like at the end of last year, it was like 8. So when you say the difference between like the 10,000, it is like, there's an actual difference on the side of the creator. Because I know, like, me personally, I wanted to get there because social media sets you up that way. Like, once you hit 10, like, when you comment on people's stuff, you're now in priority. Like, I know when I leave comments on stuff for someone that it goes into, like, it says priority, and I'll actually show my comment and it doesn't get lost, which is nice. It's also, though, created a mess in my notifications, because, like, it puts myself at the top now and I get all these notifications. I'm like, ugh. But, like, it does change, like, your psyche a little bit. But then at the same time, I'm also like, well, I remember when I was looking forward to getting to 10K, or like when I saw other people at 10K and being like, oh, they're a big deal. But like, now that I've crossed it, I'm like, nah, I'm still the same. Like, nothing's really changed. But like, you do have to realize that it changes other people's perception of you a little bit. And I still find myself doing it with other people, like, versus before, like someone with like 10 or 20K, I'd be like, ooh, now I'm like, one of us. But like, if I still see someone with like 100K, I'm like, ooh, like, should I reach out to them? Should I talk to them? Even though I know it's still the same person all along the way,
It's so funny, because I just relate to that so much, because I'm creeping up on 10, and I was joking. I'm like, is my brain going to change overnight? Like, what is going to happen? But I do feel that societally in social media, it's no different. There's a hierarchy, right? So it's like, there are people who look at us, and like, I have people that DM me and they're like, they adore me. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Don't adore me. I'm human. I am flawed, honey. And it's like, I appreciate the love, but I think we have to be careful where, as humans, we focus our attention. And I think when we have stuff going on in our personal lives, it is a great distraction. But then what happens is there is this hierarchy of like you said, the 10K people will look at the 100K people and be like, wow. And then they'll look at the million people. And it's just a combination, I think, of like societal hierarchies and expectations, and also just people feeling like quasi celebrities should really be attended to. And I don't mean to say that disrespectfully, quasi celebrity.
Mhm.
I just feel that we can idealize anybody, and I'm someone who, I don't idealize celebrity. I truly don't. Now listen, I can fangirl with the best of them because, like I said, I just appreciate Dr. Tiffany Moon. You know, I use that as an example. She's smart, she's funny, she's so well spoken and all of these things. So there's reasons I personally value her. But I don't think it's a good idea to just say, well, this person has 10,000 followers, so I idealize them. Like, that's not,
Right.
we have to use our common sense, because that's also how not so great people get a lot of traction. And boy, does that happen a lot in the Bravo sphere.
It really does. And it's so frustrating. And um, it's like the thing about reality TV that gets me too, like just watching it and observing how other people watch it, is like a couple of things that really upset me. A, the knowledge that like once a lie is out there, like it doesn't matter. Like people will believe it. Like especially because people love saying where there's smoke, there's fire. But I have learned that there isn't always. Sometimes that smoke is someone just lighting a smoke thing. There is no fire, but because they've said it, people will now latch on, and no matter what you say or what you do, they'll run with it, which drives me insane. And then also that like, oh, because they're on the TV or because they're this, like they're so great, so I'm going to dismiss all of the negative things. Like you said, I fangirl with the best of them, but I also realize like they're human, and I don't think any of them are so much better. And I know they all have their flaws, but like some people really do put them in this space of like, oh, well, now that they're wonderful, you can't say anything about them. I can't acknowledge like, even like I'm a huge Kyle fan. I'm a Kyle apologist, and I have been a Kyle apologist forever. It's my, I get a lot of flack for it. but
Me too.
but even in that, like I acknowledge she's not perfect. I can tell you moments where she messed up. I can tell you moments where her interactions weren't great. But for me, those are human moments. Like I don't expect her to be perfect. I don't expect anyone I see on TV to be perfect. I don't expect anyone I see on social media to be perfect. And I feel like sometimes they do. And when that person isn't, it's a problem. And then also when they really like a person, they'll dismiss the negative, like, oh, the negative doesn't exist. Yes, it does.
Mhm. And and I think those are such good points, because that is how people get away with bad behavior, right? Behind a lot of followers and a lot of celebrity. You know, I absolutely believe that if we look at the humanity underneath it all, we are all, we're all human, and we're all coming from a similar experience. And I just agree so much with what you said. And going back to Kyle, I laugh because I love the term a Kyle apologist, but because I was joking the other day, like, for those who don't know, I actually posted something that Kyle reposted, and she kind of like blew up my life in the most amazing way possible.
Yeah.
But what you're talking about is not being an apologist. It's just saying this person seems to have basically good character, but she's human and she
Right.
screws up, and she, just like, I'm not perfect, you're not perfect, nobody's perfect. We just feel that Kyle is someone who generally has good character. And now there are people who project their stuff onto her and will aggressively disagree with that, but that's fine. But yes, to your point, I think if we looked more at the humanity and less at the celebrity, we'd be a lot less angry and frustrated. Like, when people get angry and frustrated, it's like, do you know that they're not, like, you're not getting paid for defending them on the internet,
That part, yeah. I
right?
have
Like,
to actually admit that I now, because because I used to get in a little bit of tussles about Kyle, I now, with her and other people, I'm just like, listen, they're not paying me to defend them. They're fine. Like I don't need to defend these people. And I really had to, but you do, because like I think that's part of it, is because you're seeing their reality, not a fake world. Like you can't help but feel like you know them on a certain level. So then for me, it's like when I hear someone say something bad about my friend, I'm like, whoa, calm down. Even though they're not my friends and I don't really know them, but like your instinct is to protect them and say stuff. And I really had to tell myself, like, cut it out. go do your work. Like, you don't need to be in the comment section going back
Right.
and forth with people. But I feel like a lot of people don't do that check on themselves, and then they're in the comment section.
Yeah, you can tell when people don't do that check, and I'm going to say I'm going to do a sweeping suspicion that most people on social media don't do that check, because you can tell. And listen, I get it, right? Because I adore you. If someone said something about you, I'd want to get really angry and frustrated and pop off, right? But
Yeah.
these people aren't really our friends. They're not paying us to do that. And it really is a waste of your time and mine, right? Because listen, and that's just part of being human. I used to get in arguments in comment sections too, because it's like, well, you can't just say anything you want to me because I'm a therapist. Like, I'm also
Right.
a human. I'm not a doormat. I'm not like
Mhm.
someone who you can just like verbally abuse. And then people get really angry about that. But I think the point of what you're saying is like, you just got to realize that we enjoy these people, but it is a parasocial relationship. And ultimately, we have to keep our eyes on the prize, which is ourself, and stay in our lane. And, when you have those moments where you're arguing in the comment section, just be gentle with yourself and say, okay, whoopsie doodle, let me move on.
Right. Well, I had to set up a 2-response rule because I love good conversation. Obviously, that's why I do so much in the communications. But I really also had to realize that not everyone is there to like. I love talking to people I disagree with because for me, it's a point of growth. Like, I don't need us to agree. I just want to know where you're coming from because most people don't really do things from an ill intent. Like, their purpose isn't to hurt other people or to make people mad. It's because from their viewpoint, it makes sense. So for me, when someone doesn't make sense or I think like, what? I want to know how you got to where you got. So like, I want to engage in those conversations. But being on social media, you learn like, no, some people really just want to make you upset. Some people really are not there to engage and give you their viewpoint. They just want to troll you. And so like, I have a 2-response limit. Like, if it seems like it's not like an actual connection, I don't respond after 2 times.
I love that rule, and I adopted the same thing because you and I truly are similar in that way. And so my biggest toxic trait was thinking that I could have conversations with all people on social media.
Yeah.
And boy, did I find out that was incorrect. Because some people really do. They just come to, I call it dropping opinion bombs. They want to drop a true bomb. An opinion and a discussion is one thing, but an opinion bomb and saying, well, this is my opinion, and if you're not on board, and there's insults in there, like, that's not a conversation. So I truly think part of the problem is our society lacks a lot of social awareness in terms of how to manage conflict societally. We don't teach, especially women, we do not teach women how to have appropriate conflict. And here's the thing, conflict is a very necessary and important part of personal growth and relationship growth. You can't have growth without conflict.
Right.
But the problem is people in the Bravo sphere, it's like very black and white. It's either like all love or all hate, and conflict and discussion cannot. Only toxic conflict can thrive in that arena.
Yeah.
It's not a healthy discussion. So I like your rule. I have, what? I'm going to take your lead. And because I would like respond like a third time. And then I'm like, no, you know what? This isn't helpful.
Sometimes it's so hard. Yep.
It truly, well, because you're human. And when you read something that hurts you, you get, I don't know about you, but I get this feeling inside that I'm just like, oh, I don't like this.
Yeah.
And, I just don't subscribe to hurting each other on social media. But I'll tell you something really interesting. I had a couple of folks come to my page, and I welcome people to, but again, respectfully, right? And people do it really well all the time. There's a great community. I'm really excited about that. But so people were coming to my page and, being really unkind and disrespectful and bullying, quite frankly. And so I would block. And there's been a community of folks who've been blocked that have banded together.
Nice.
They're
not doing great until you have haters. So good job.
Yeah, I guess. Well, here I am. Ooh.
You made it.
I made it. I definitely have haters, but it's fun. Their greatest criticism and critique is like, well, you're not willing to have a conversation. And it's like, nope, you're not willing to understand that you're coming across aggressive and you're not trying to have a conversation. You're trying to bait me. And
Mhm.
that's different. And, boundaries on social media, as in life, are crucial.
Yes. Yes.
Crucial.
Yep.
So I appreciate that we're even talking about this, because please, people watching and listening, don't argue with strangers on the internet. It's a waste of your time.
It'll stress you out for no good reason.
That's
No,
right.
and you're right. And like I have become, I love blocking. Which is so funny because in real life it's very hard for me to actually end
Mhm.
relationships, break away from people. But like on social media, I will block with the swiftness because I block people who leave mean comments on my page because it's like that's my page, that's my space, and I don't have to welcome your negativity. Like
That's
you're
right.
welcome to have an opinion, but I don't have to subscribe to that in my space. And especially, like you said, I know that people who are like my friends and my fans and my followers, like even if I'm able to be like whatever, I'm ignoring them. I know when they come into my space and see comments, especially as someone who's black and plus size and talks about social stuff, I get so many like mean comments. And of course, I'll always immediately jump to like the way I can be like, the sky is blue. They'll be like,
Ugh.
you're fat. I'm like, oh, okay, thank you. So it's like block.
Mhm.
But I also don't want people who come into my space to feel like they need to defend me on my behalf. So I just block them. And now,
Mhm.
like, it's really changed the way that I view other people blocking because it's like, why not? Like,
Mhm.
I will shout, like, I will say it. I'm always on my soapbox about like other people's opinions don't matter. What matters is like how you feel. And you can focus on the negative or you can focus on the positive. It's your choice. But like, blocking, and that's the thing I love about social media, it's such like a visual representation of so many life things. So like
Mhm.
when you take like the, oh, you can focus on good opinions or bad opinions, the literal version of that is your social media. Like you can leave up those negative comments or you can block them and protect your peace. And so I'm all for it. I think more people should block it. In fact, I do this new thing where if I'm in someone's comment section and like someone leaves like an especially rude comment or mean comment that just says like they're a bad person, I just block them. And it makes me feel better because I know I'll never come across them again. And I know that they won't find my space in the future and leave something mean for me. It makes me feel good.
Can I tell you, I do the exact same thing.
You?
I
No,
swear, I knew we liked each other for a reason.
it just feels better. It's like it's so hard to protect yourself. So any little way that you can, you
Right.
have to do it.
I agree. And to your point, and this is for some reason in the therapy space, people don't understand this, but it's your page, right? It's my page. And I wouldn't ever allow someone into my home talking to me
Yes,
crazy,
exactly.
disrespectful, etc. So why am I going to allow that on my page? Number one. And number two, it is a protection to the community, right? Because I have folks who are so gentle, loving, wonderful
Mhm.
souls, and I don't want them having to be exposed to that kind of negativity. So it's really for you, it's for the community. And it is just, it's a good practice for life. Like social media is a microcosm, right, of
Mhm.
life in a
Yep.
bigger sense. And so, yeah, block liberally, create your piece, create the page that you want to create, and the community of folks who, I know my folks appreciate it because I
Mhm.
get messages all the time. Thank you for deleting that comment. And by the way, I have to say that when you tell me that people say that stuff to you, it's like, it makes me so full of rage. I just cannot even express it.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, the message that I want to say is that pick low hanging fruit of things that they know will truly hurt someone.
Yeah.
And for me, after the sting of it, because you are human, and I don't care what anybody says in terms of, don't care what other people think. It is part of the human condition to care
It
what other
is.
people think,
Yeah.
right? We can't just pretend that that doesn't exist. So, validation for you that as a human, hearing that and seeing that is absolutely horrifying. But B, knowing that you're not them.
Right.
I
Yeah.
just, the only solace that I get is that I'm so grateful because, I know you have a story, I have a story, but I have been through a lot of things that really could have turned me sour.
Yeah.
And I went the other way, and I'm
Yep.
so proud of myself, and you should be proud of yourself too. And the people doing that on the internet are miserable and lonely and sad and just perpetuating their misery. So,
It's true. And that's something that I really had to work through. Because like I said, I normally try to think of the intent behind what people do and say certain things. And I found that I actually was letting my empathy overshoot my boundaries and my natural like I gave people way too many chances,
Right.
and I give to people way too many grace, and I realized that sometimes you have to pull back on that, because yes, that person had a horrible childhood or had things go wrong with them, but happy, good people didn't live perfect lives. Like my roads have been a disaster since I was 3, like just with the different things I've had to deal with, like
Right.
war, abuse, blah, blah, blah. But like, I'm still a
Mhm.
decent person. And like, it's a choice. And someone deciding to be a bad person is a choice too. And I don't have to, because I'm bad. Like, I would feel guilty for being bad at people for being bad, but it's like,
Yeah.
but that's their choice. Like, it's okay, because I don't like to feel judgmental, and I would feel like, oh, I'm being judgmental and
Hmm.
they had a hard life, but like, they're still a jerk because they're choosing to let their actions of their bad life and inflict it on other people, whereas they could make the choice, like some of us, to not. So I think that that's
Right.
always like, for me, I think for others, is realizing that like your empathy can still be there without you letting it out rank or out your whatever, your judgment and your boundaries.
Yeah, and I think what you just said is so special and important is that, it reminds me of the saying, be kind, but take no shit. And, I've kind of had to adopt this because as a therapist, I have met with some of this scary, really scary folks. And I'm able to see past whatever they present with to what caused it. So for me, what you're saying is like a daily struggle that I have. But at the end of the day, um, mental health issues and trauma is a reason for behavior, but it is not an excuse.
Mm.
And that is the thing that I always, want to talk about because it's just you cannot use that as an excuse to like I use the analogy of people will not deal with their trauma and it'll be kind of like a big boulder attached to their ankle and they may not be purposely trying to hurt people but they are right because they're just pretending it's not there. And so I just think that as humans we have to be accountable for all of it, and people who behave that way there's just no excuses.
Mhm.
There's just not.
Yep. No, I completely agree. And I want to get to comments soon, but I also wanted to mention and talk about with the whole like social media and reality TV thing. I wonder why it's so hard for people to really like acknowledge the fakeness of it. And I don't know if it's because I'm in a social space and like I know how. So if anyone watches like my Instagram, I always say like the Instagram is like the magazine cover, my stories are behind the scenes. And it's really important for me to share like the positives and negatives, because I used to share the positives because I wanted to be an uplifting space. But then I found like people will look at that and be like, oh, your life is so great. There's nothing wrong, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, whoa, calm down. I just was dealing with a lot. I just pulled myself together. Like before this, anyone watching this is like, oh, you're having this great conversation. This is great. If you look at my stories, I've been in bed all day with a terrible migraine, feeling awful up until like 2 minutes before this. But here I am, which is great. Like, I'm glad I'm able to have those moments. But in the past, I wouldn't have shared
Right.
all the bad leading up to this. And then people would just see this and be like, oh, she's so great, blah, blah, blah. But I realized that, like, there's something to be said in seeing the struggle, like seeing that I was struggling all day and I still do this, or being real about the days where I can't. Like there are some days where the struggle is so bad that I have to pull back. And
Mhm.
because I know that it's a choice to share that, I also know that like when I look at other people and they don't show that side, which is fine, it's okay. But I also don't put them on this pedestal as like everything's great or everything's blah blah blah. But it's interesting to me that people aren't able to necessarily do that, or even like look at a story and see like, hey, as much as I share all day, those are like 15-second clips and there's 24 hours. I've left the state and come back and not shared it on my stories. But if you talk to someone, they would say like, oh, I know what you did all day. No, you don't. You know what I told you, you know?
No, it's so true. That just really struck me funny. It's so true. And I first of all, I appreciate you sharing that. And for me, like, my health struggles, I do again, like you, I think it's so important to show both sides of it. And I call it sharing your experience, strength, and hope. That's the kind of phrase I use. It comes from the program of AA, and it was just something that I learned that I feel like encompasses it really well. But essentially, what you're saying is you value authenticity. And that is why I am attracted to you. And that is why you're attracted to me, right? People who value authenticity above all else, and truth and growth, it's like you emit a light and we can see it in each other, you know? And so I see your light and I just, by the way, you could have always rescheduled. I just want you to know that personally. Because listen, sometimes you just, part of being human is like, okay, maybe today I don't have it. Maybe tomorrow I will.
Right.
Chronic illness forces me to have that perspective, but it's just good to share that and have that perspective anyway, because the truth of the matter is, going back to your original statement, we know nothing. Reality shows are not real.
Right.
And we know nothing truly about what is going on in these people's lives, truly. And I think I'm gonna share this, T, but I can't be specific. There are people in the Bravo sphere that I have spoken to directly that it is shocking the lack of like maturity and healthy I'm trying to be judicious.
I hear you. Yeah.
They were a whole mess. Let me just say that they were
They're
a whole
a hot
mess.
mess. Yeah.
Okay. And so it's like sometimes if you don't have that behind the scenes information, or like you may not have the behind the scenes information, but like you just know it because you understand how humans work and how authenticity is. But yeah, I think people they lose sight of the fact that this is not real. We don't really know these people, because that is always in my disclaimer. Like, I don't know these people. They're definitely not my clients. Like, I am making my best educated guesses based on my own, experience and things like that. So it's such an important point. And I think that we would all be better off if more accounts showed the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? All of it.
Yeah.
But there's just some people who aren't comfortable being vulnerable enough to do that. And so congratulations that you are. That's great.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and it's hard. It's kind of like what I was saying before. Like, people really do put you in the box of what they need in their life. So if they look at you as aspirational and then you show your negative sides, they're like, well, I don't want to see that, because now you're not aspirational for me. Or the other side, if you're showing your struggles and then you get better and you're doing well, they're like, well, I'm not doing well, so I don't want to see you do well, because it makes me feel better, because we were at the same level, and now why are you doing better and I'm not? So like, also being on the side of it where you understand that is important, because people really will project. They'll get in your DMs and tell you some things and you're like, okay, I didn't ask that. I didn't need to know that. Like, thank you for sharing. So you really have to like be aware of it. And like, one thing that the whole reality TV, social media has taught me is how much critical thinking skills are lacking. Like, truly, critical thinking skills are very much lacking. People, like, they just either take it at face value without thinking deeper, or like they take it and put their interpretation of it, and like that's what it is. And it's why I'm also like really careful about, and I make a big deal about like not rewarding bad behavior, because it's so easy for us to do so, especially when people see people in a space where other people are giving them recognition, right? So if you go to my page, you're like, oh, all those followers, she must be great. I might not be great. In fact, I'm not a lot of people cup of tea, and that's okay. But it's like, people will see stuff and say like, oh, they're on TV or they're on this, so they must have this other stuff. And like, no, they're just as much of a hot mess, probably more so, because you have to have a level of being a hot mess to stay on a reality TV show for that long. They're probably the least likely people we should be putting on those pedestals, but we do. And it really makes you realize like how many people don't use those critical thinking skills, and also how many people live in cognitive dissonance. Like, there's a word that like, I learned it and I use it because it's so appropriate for the world in general. Could you explain it though a little bit, like what cognitive dissonance is and how it applies to this?
Sure. So cognitive dissonance is where a process that should happen where you may hold one belief and you will see or observe something that contradicts that belief and still hold the same belief, despite the fact that there is so much evidence to dispute that belief. And it is a very real cognitive issue. And societally, I just, and I have to be careful because I don't want to sound like a curmudgeon, but I do feel like there is just such a lack of critical thinking skills in our society, period. Like, just because a celebrity says something on social media, like, does not make it true, does not make it accurate. And, part of growing and learning should be, okay, like, I've held beliefs and then I've seen things in practice, or I've worked with certain diagnoses. And then I say, oh, well, I've collected evidence to dispute
Yes,
these,
like
right?
that's how the brain should work, and I don't understand how it doesn't work like that for so many people.
Okay, so my short answer to why they don't, that's not how it works, is people utilize their cognitive abilities and emotional stuff. Like, you can either use it to help you grow or to kind of wall you off,
Mm,
protect yourself. And for some people, knowledge is scary, and
mm,
it makes them feel incompetent and vulnerable, right? Like, for me, I admit, I people are like, "Oh, you know so much." I'm like, "Mm-mm, there's a lot I don't know.
right.
I don't know everything." And, like, do not take what I'm saying as gospel. This is what I'm saying. So I do think that there is a part of that needs to happen more critically, thinking about, what is this person's behavior? And for example, I will tell you, I'm not going to say the name of the person, but there's a therapist online that I was following and I really, really liked. And then I found out some really information that was really jarring.
Mm,
And so for me, now part of the process is thinking through, doing some more research, kind of really understanding, not jumping to conclusions. But again, that is a mature, healthy, evolved response. And not all folks have the ability to take that route, if that makes sense.
it does, and it really took getting into this space, and not to go into politics, but really politics since 2016, to really understand how many people are willing to see a fact in front of their face and be like, never mind, I don't believe it. And it was so hard for me. Like, it's so physically, mentally frustrating for me because I'm just like, how I don't
Mhm.
understand. But now I just understand that that's just how people are, and they live in their delusion world. And it actually has helped me on some level because I'm like, if they can be delusional about that stuff, I can be delusional about myself and think whatever I want by myself and just hang out with the people who feel the same way. So it's wonderful for myself, for my self-esteem, because otherwise I go a little nuts because I just don't understand it. And I get that they are trying to protect themselves. And I think, like you mentioned, it took me a while to realize that some people really are scared of knowledge and some people really are scared of like change. And it took me a while because I love it. Like, I have such a thirst for knowledge. I'm just like you. If someone's like, you're so smart, I'm like, no, there's so much I don't know. There's
Right.
so much I don't know. And I also respect other people for having different types of knowledge.
Mhm.
Um, it's such a cheesy thing, but I realize it I pick up little things along the way through like the random sources. But on Legally Blonde, the first time I watched it, it caused like a click moment for me in the court scene when she was talking about like the perm and like how you need to have like so much time to blah blah blah. And I'm like, so this whole time, like, everyone's thinking she's so ditzy, but she has extensive knowledge about fashion. She has extensive knowledge about hair stuff. And so why it might not be like things that we're like, oh, this is important to know. If you really step back, a lot of people are like that. Like, when I lived in Florida for a while, my friend's dad was into like hunting and fishing and all of those things, and
Mhm.
extensive knowledge. He couldn't find his way around New York City to save his life, but he could tell you everything about swamps. And like, that's something to be respected, like that knowledge and that growth. But like, there are so many people, because they're insecure about where their knowledge is,
Mhm.
that they don't want to show they have a lot of knowledge in any area. Versus, I think some of us who are like, well, I'm confident in this, but I can tell you I know nothing about any of that. We're open to receiving more, and we don't feel the need to like block it off or be defensive when we don't know stuff.
Right. And that's the key. When people are, it really is all about our ego defenses, right? When we feel less than, when we feel, oh, is she saying that I'm not smart? Does this mean that I'm not? The ego defenses is what comes out, and that's what protects people. But what should happen with growth and development is you take the ego aside and you say, okay, let me really look at this. But there are just some
Mhm.
people who aren't capable of doing that. And I think acceptance that they're, there's this saying I like to say, you can be the sweetest peach on the tree, and some people just don't like peaches.
Facts.
And some people, maybe they don't like peaches, they tell themselves they don't, whatever it is. But there's a saying in the program that other people's opinions of me are none of my business. And I just truly try to, keep all of that in mind when
Mhm.
it just helps to not necessarily take things so personally, because I
Yeah.
can tell. Can I ask you, are you an empath? Can I?
I mean, I don't know if there's testing for it, but like
Right.
if I had to define myself, I would say like I very
Yeah.
much, and actually it's interesting because I love being by myself a lot, and it's hard for people to understand, but I feel so much other people's like emotions, and like if we're in the same room and your face changes slightly, like I notice and I'm like, well, what's wrong? Or like blah blah blah. And so like I really like being by myself because I don't have to take on other people's energies and other things. So I mean, I guess unofficially I am. I don't know how to tell officially.
Well, I can tell you officially that you are, because just through having this conversation, I can just tell that you are so sensitive to other people's experiences that sometimes it is actually challenging for you.
It
And
is.
I recognize that because I am the same way. I can physically feel people's emotions.
Mhm.
So I would have a client come in the room and they wouldn't have to say anything, and I would know exactly how they're feeling, and they're like, are you psychic? And I'm like, no, I get you, I
Yeah.
feel. And so I just wanted to put it out there that I think that's what you have going on, and just so you know, like, you are doing a great job. And just try not to second guess yourself a lot. Not that I want to therapize you. I just like,
No.
the empath in me sees the empath in you, and just like, so you're doing a great job, and you can only do the best that you can do.
Mhm.
And I get the sense too, like me, we're kind of overthinkers.
150%. My constant battle. Yeah.
Right, me too. Sometimes I say to my therapist, I'm like, I wish I wasn't smart, like I wish I didn't get it, but
No,
then
seriously, me too. I say it all the time. I'm
no,
like, I
but
wish
honest,
I could like choose to have cognitive, like I just want to not know things. Like I wish I could pretend like I didn't know so
right?
much and enjoy life more.
I know, but ultimately, what she reminds me of, which is what I'll remind you of, is that those people ultimately aren't happy and
True.
fulfilled. And so, there's two sides to every coin, and sometimes the other side to being empathic and really genuinely caring is hard. It's hard on you in
Yeah,
every way, shape, or form. So I get it.
absolutely. I've had such a great time talking to you. Like I could talk forever, but I A, want to respect your time, and B, I want to get to some comments because we've had some really good ones. So we're gonna pull up some comments and just see what the people have been saying. Carol
Okay.
said, "Good evening. Hello."
Hello.
Oh, hi, Izzy. Izzy's here. She's part of the Feel Good Talk team, also the family.
Oh,
Unfortunate, negative always sells. It's sad but true. Yep, negativity. It
next.
does, and it's unfortunate, and it's why we have such a clickbait society too, because people
Oh, yeah.
know. And I can't tell you the time. That's another reason I don't get into the trenches with people. Is
Mhm.
there are so many times like so someone will post an article or something, I read it, and I of course have the reaction they want me to react. But then I go and read the article, and it's like opposite of what the title was or
Mhm.
opposite of the message. But then you go back and people are arguing in the comment section. You can tell they did not read it at all.
Right.
They're arguing about that title, but not about the content because
Mhm.
people know negativity gets you the clicks,
That's
unfortunately.
absolutely right. I'll post something and someone will ask a question and I'm like, "Well, if you read what I wrote, I answered it. Maybe
Right,
read it."
right, exactly, that part. It's amazing the amount of time people take to come up with negative things to say and do versus positive, which could help instead of hurt. I agree. It's like, and that's the thing too, is I tell myself that like truly happy people don't have time to sit and be negative. Like I really have time for all the things I love doing and all the people I love talking to. I certainly don't have time to go out of my way to find things that are negative.
Mhm.
Like people, the thing with social media is like truly you create your world. It's a positive and a negative because you can really create a silo for yourself.
Oh,
But
yeah.
if you're constantly seeing things that upset you, it's because you're constantly clicking on and interacting with things that upset you. Stop doing it, and then you won't see it as much. So, like this, what he says makes total sense to me because people really will focus on the negative when they could focus on the positive.
I mean, absolutely. I would argue it takes more energy to focus on the negative, but I'm going to use the law of attraction as a good example here. Is like attracts like, and dislike attracts dislike, right? And that's why we see a lot of, I use the term echo chambers. So on social media, someone just said people are scared of the truth. That's also
Mm-hmm.
true.
Yep.
On social media, people want to be in their echo chamber that tells them, whatever it is, they're determined to believe.
Mm-hmm.
And the danger of that is, I always say I've been with my husband for, almost 22 years, which is unbelievable to me. But
Congratulations.
thank you. But people, oh gosh, I just lost my train of thought where I was going with that.
You're saying people like their echo chambers because they got on
Oh,
social media.
like we need part of being a true partner is telling your partner when they're wrong or
Mhm.
checking them or, respectfully and with love. We need people in our life who will say, "Hey, I hear you. Have you considered this?" Or, let's look at this side of the coin. And there are just people who aren't willing to have those folks in their life. They don't
Right.
want it. They can't handle it.
Nope.
And it shows in
Unfortunately.
their behavior.
Yeah, and that's the danger of social media is like you can kind of like what I was saying before, how you don't need fire to have smoke. You can just make smoke.
Right.
People can just find someone who validates what they're saying, and they'll both be very loud and wrong, but it doesn't matter because they've had someone validate their thoughts. So now, no matter what, it's a real thought, and they're going with it.
And Bravo in particular, they're so bad with that, with the whole "where there's smoke, there's fire" thing, and
Uh-huh.
I'm glad we're talking about it because that is gaslighting. It's like, yeah, they're not necessarily it
Right.
just because you tried to start a fire and then go yelling around, "Oh, there's smoke." Well, you started it. It
Right.
doesn't mean, it's like, what are you talking about?
You with that, right? Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you bring up the last comment? I'm sorry, the last two, they went really quickly. Okay. I think people are conditioned to be emotionally invested and opinionated when watching reality because they watch with the same mindset as fiction. That's true.
That's true.
When you watch fictional movies and series, you see the whole story. The way that reality shows are edited to push a story can make people think that they know the full situation when they don't. That is so absolutely right. Could not agree more.
So on point. So on point. Thank you
And
for
also,
sharing
people
that.
are too comfortable being biased and sharing opinions based on snippets. Even in real life situations, people are so ready to give advice or validate other people's actions when they've only been given one side of the story. Yep. A
Yep.
lot of that also. And we
Yeah.
see it on the thing to me is, and I guess it goes back to that conversation about being open to growth or not,
Mhm.
is like because I see that happening so much in the interactions of my reality stars, I'm careful about it in real life. Like I see them jump to conclusions or have one-sided conversations. So like in real life, when people bring situations to me, I ask questions before I give advice, or I think more because I know like there might be other spots. So it's interesting to me that people can literally watch it, but still not take that away from it. Like, hey, maybe be a
Mhm.
little different in real life, but they really don't.
No, they really don't. Not at all.
Busy says she's an empath too. Oh,
Oh, welcome.
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 I have the ability to read micro expressions, and it's tough. It is tough, especially because then I'm like, well, maybe I'm just overthinking. But usually I end up being right, so I guess not. But
Well, there's a saying I have that overthinking is underfeeling, and I kind of live by that in terms of if I find myself overthinking, I know that I need to touch base with a feeling underneath it and then
mm,
process that more. So I don't
yeah,
know if that's helpful to anyone listening, but because I think sometimes our thoughts and cognitive dissonance and all that can protect us from our emotions, and we
mhm,
need to fight that urge.
yes,
So it's a very common thing. And one thing I will say also is that people who have experienced a lot of childhood trauma, um, right, we
right,
both, and
yeah,
lots of other folks, you develop these skills and abilities because you had to read your parents or your caregivers'
yeah,
actions to stay safe and
hmm,
read their faces. So sometimes it's a trauma response, and so and there's like I wish I could have a Venn diagram. Like sometimes it's a trauma response, and when it's paired with just a natural ability, then in this gray area can just lie a lot of symptoms like overthinking and, over focusing on like, you're so careful and cautious not to hurt anybody. But at the same time, it's like, well, then am I abandoning myself?
hmm,
So, the whole point of this is just, it's hard. Life's, and it's hard. And just my message to people is be gentle
yeah,
with yourself. How would you want someone to treat you in your time of frustration? Because too often survivors of trauma have internalized those caregivers' voices, and we end up self-neglecting, or we end up, doing things that are not good for us. And so, you know, it's just being gentle with yourself and trying to be
yeah, I
kind,
absolutely agree. Yeah, and it is. It's part of that trauma thing. Like for me, growing up around, especially like domestic violence, like I'm so sensitive to walking like a child. And I think that's part of whatever, like you said, whatever natural empath ability that I may have had definitely grew from being in that situation, because I had to be. So I had to protect myself. Like, what was it going to be like when I got home? Like, would they be angry? Like, I had to be so on top of it that it just made that grow into me being an overthinker. And then you try to push that away. And something I love that you just said is like, overthinking is sometimes like pushing away your feelings. Because something a therapist talked to me about, and I've since adapted it and it's helped a lot, is like allowing myself to feel how I feel. I think a lot of times I feel like I shouldn't, because I'm overthinking. I'll feel like, well, I shouldn't feel like this because I know A, B, C, and D. But like, you can't help how you feel. So like now it's like, okay, like I'm going to block off this time and just feel how I feel. Who cares if I think it's the right feelings? Just feel, whether it's sadness, upsetness, or whatever, and then go back to what I need to do. And I've found that that has helped so much, because because what would happen is I would try to push it away. I would overthink the situation, or I would push it away. And then it stays with me a lot longer because it keeps popping up. But if I block off, like, listen, I'm just going to have a pity party in bed, listening to music for an hour, and that's that. Then the rest of my day, I'm not thinking about how I shouldn't be having a pity party because I did it. So I think like that is super important. Paul had, go ahead.
Oh, I just want to say what you just said was brilliant. That's all. Brilliant. I love it. I fully agree. If everyone just felt their feelings, we would all be better off. Yes. Yes. And we have to feel that we're competent to survive the journey of feeling our feelings. I think people get really scared, but no one has ever died from feeling a feeling. I promise.
Yes. So. That is a huge one. Like, the fact that your feelings will be okay, and it's okay to like ride through them. Like, it's okay to be really sad. You'll be okay on the other side of it. It's okay that you're really angry. You'll be on the other side of it. Like, just getting to the point where realizing that it was okay to feel that was groundbreaking for me. This is why I also encourage therapy and therapists, because you can vent to your friends, but like, they're the ones who really give you the tools. That's my thing about therapy, is you can talk to your pastor, you can talk to your friends, you can vent to anybody, and they may have a listening ear. But a trained therapist will give you like the tools to get past those moments.
Absolutely.
Paul said, like, when a person comes home from jail and gets praise, but the one that comes home from college and starts doing great things, they get no acknowledgement. Why is that? I think I have a feeling for why that is, but why do you think it is?
Well, the stigma. I think. Well, so was that gentleman's point that? Can you go back to it for 1 second? I may have missed. So a person comes home from jail and gets praised. Okay. So I think sometimes there can be a stigma in terms of like, I call it the curse of the competent. Yeah. So people who are really competent, every workplace that they've ever been in, every situation, it's always just like they don't get their flowers because it's just expected that they are to be competent and to go to college and to do this and to do that. Whereas someone who's like turning their life around after going to jail, which is admirable and amazing, but both parties are doing things to grow and make their life better. And I'm sure, there's a bunch of things probably related to this too, like race, socioeconomic status, all those factors. But that's kind of my general thought.
No, and that's great. And that's something that I have really had to work past. And it's a frustration I always had growing up younger. Like, I'd be like, why do people get praised and I do great things and I don't? And I hope this doesn't sound braggadocious, but I just have come to realize that like I feel so awkward saying it because I feel like I sound like but like I feel like I naturally operate at like a higher level of greatness than average. And so like even when I think that I'm doing like people think I'm doing great, because to me that's not as great as I should be. But then when I operate at my level, people get used to me being at that level, so they don't praise it the way they should. And even I've just gotten to the point where I can even, I guess, not comfortable, but I'm getting better about saying that. Because to me, I don't want to be like, oh, I'm so special, but it's true. Like when I output at like my competent level, not even going above, just competent level, it's usually at a level that's greater, but people get used to it from me. So they're like, well, whatever. So I have to find that I have to give myself flowers before other people are like, oh yeah, you are great. I'm like, I know, thank you.
Yeah.
Like, but they just get used to it. So they don't like, it's just whatever to them.
That's right. And for you to say that, I danced when you said it, because that is self-esteem and self-confidence. There is nothing, in fact, I wish more people could talk like that. And listen, I struggle with it too, but I'm just saying, giving yourself flowers and acknowledging your hard work is standing by yourself and being your number one advocate and supporter. So I'm here for that.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for joining. We went a lot longer than I normally do, but this is just such a great conversation. But I know this Feel Good Talk has other great shows coming up tonight, and I want to be respectful of my teammates. So thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much to everybody who listened. You can find Melissa online. She's at Your Bish Therapist on Instagram. You can email her. You can find me online, African Butterfly. But I definitely recommend following her. She has really great advice and tips. And thank you again so much for your time, Melissa.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it very, very much. Thank you all.
Thank you.